There is a specific moment, when your bank account crosses $100,000 for the first time. And almost nobody talks about what actually happens next. Not the celebration, not the screenshot. What happens inside your head over the following months as you slowly realize that something fundamental has shifted, and you can't quite put your finger on what. Before that moment, you were a person who saves money. After that moment, without you doing anything different, you become something else. A person whose money saves itself. That sentence sounds like a riddle. It isn't. It's math. And it's the kind of math that, once it switches on inside your life, never fully switches off again. Today I'm going to show you exactly what changes the moment you cross $100,000. Not just the numbers, though we'll absolutely cover those. The way you think. The way you make decisions. The way fear and confidence trade places in your brain. And the third shift in particular is the one that catches almost everyone off guard, because it has nothing to do with money at all. Let's get into it. Let's start with why this specific number, out of all the numbers, deserves an entire video. Because on the surface, $100,000 doesn't sound like much in 2026. It won't buy you a house in most cities. It's not retirement money. Plenty of people will tell you with total confidence that $100,000 isn't a big deal anymore. But here's what those people are missing. $100,000 was never about what it can buy. It's about what it can become. And the moment you understand the difference between those two things, you'll understand why Charlie Munger, one of the greatest investors who ever lived, a man worth over $2 billion, once said the first 100,000 is a bitch. But you have to do it. Not because the number itself is magic, but because of what happens on the other side of it. So let's talk about what actually happens. 5 shifts. Some financial, some psychological, all of them real. Shift number 1. Your money gets a job. Before $100,000, your money is basically unemployed. It sits there. It exists to be spent, eventually, on something. It's a holding pen, not a workforce. But the moment you cross 6 figures, something changes in the math, and the change is bigger than people expect. At a historical average return of around 7% after inflation, $100,000 generates about $7,000 a year. Without you doing anything. Without working an extra hour. Without picking up a side hustle, $7,000 just shows up every year because the money is now large enough to meaningfully work on its own. Now, $7,000 a year might not sound like financial freedom, and it's not. But here's what it actually is. It's the first time in your life that you have an employee. A silent, tireless, 24-hour-a-day employee that never calls in sick, never asks for a raise, and never quits. Before this point, you had exactly one income source. You, your time, your effort, your hours. After this point, you have 2. You and your money. And the second one works while you sleep. This is the shift that Charlie Munger was really talking about. Not that $100,000 is some magic number that unlocks a vault. It's that $100,000 is the point where your money stops being a passenger in your financial life and starts being a second driver. But here's where it gets interesting. Because that second driver doesn't just sit at $7,000 a year forever. It accelerates. And almost nobody understands how fast. Shift number 2. The hardest part is now behind you, even though it doesn't feel that way. This is the shift that breaks people's brains, because it contradicts everything intuition tells you. You'd think that the bigger the number gets, the harder it is to keep growing. More money, more pressure, slower progress, right? It's actually the opposite. And the math proves it in a way that almost feels unfair. Getting from $0 to $100,000 takes most people, saving aggressively, somewhere around 7 years. 7 years of grinding, sacrificing, watching the number creep up painfully slowly, sometimes feeling like it's barely moving at all. But here's what happens next. Getting from $100,000 to $200,000 takes about 5 years, even if you don't increase how much you're saving. Getting from $200,000 to $400,000 takes around 7 more years. The first $100,000 was the slowest $100,000 you will ever earn in your entire life. Every 100,000 after that comes faster, and the milestones get bigger while the time between them often gets shorter. This is the part where most people make their biggest mistake. They look at how hard those first 7 years felt, and they assume the next 7 will feel the same, or worse. So they either give up, thinking it's not worth the grind, or they panic and start taking unnecessary risks, trying to speed up a process that's already quietly speeding up on its own. But the truth is, you already did the hardest part. The snowball is already rolling. It just doesn't look like it yet. Because the visible progress on a hill that's just starting to slope downward looks remarkably similar to the visible progress on a hill that's still climbing. The terrain changed. Your eyes just haven't caught up yet. But the math shifts are only half of this story. Because the moment your bank account crosses 6 figures, something else starts changing. Something inside your head. And this is the part nobody warns you about. Shift number 3. Your relationship with risk flips. Here's the shift that catches almost everyone off guard, because it has nothing to do with money at all. It's about fear, and specifically about what your brain considers an emergency. Before $100,000, most people live with what researchers call a scarcity mindset, even if they're not technically poor. Every unexpected expense feels like a threat. A car repair, a medical bill, a slow month at work. These things trigger a real physical stress response. Because there's no buffer. The financial floor and the financial ceiling are uncomfortably close together. When something goes wrong, you feel it immediately, in your body, before you've even done the math. After $100,000, that floor and ceiling separate, not by an enormous amount, but by enough. A $1,000 car repair. The exact same $1,000 car repair that used to derail an entire month now barely registers. It's an annoyance. It's a number on a spreadsheet. It is not, anymore, a crisis. And here's the part that surprises people. This change happens almost instantly, the moment you cross the threshold, way before the money has actually grown into something life-changing. The relief isn't proportional to the amount. It's proportional to the buffer. And $100,000 is the point where, for most people, the buffer finally becomes real. This changes how you make decisions in ways that compound over time. Calm decisions, made from a place of stability, are statistically better than fear-based decisions made under pressure. The person with no buffer who faces a surprise expense often reaches for the worst possible tool: a high-interest credit card, a payday loan, an early withdrawal from retirement savings with brutal penalties, because the fear demands an immediate solution regardless of long-term cost. The person with the buffer can pause, can think, can choose the slower, cheaper, smarter option. Over a lifetime, that single difference, fear-based decisions versus calm decisions, separates people far more than their starting income ever does. But there's a fourth shift, and this one is uncomfortable to talk about, because it's not really about your bank account, it's about everyone else's reaction to it. Shift number 4. You start seeing the world differently. And it can be lonely. Here's something almost nobody prepares you for. Crossing $100,000 doesn't just change your relationship with money. It can quietly change your relationship with the people around you and with the culture you're swimming in. Once you've built real savings, once you've felt that buffer, once you've watched your money start generating its own income, you start noticing things you didn't notice before. The car payment your friend is stressed about, the one that's nearly as much as your entire emergency fund's monthly growth, suddenly looks different to you. The new phone everyone's excitedly upgrading to. The one that costs roughly what your money earned you last month without you lifting a finger, starts to look like a strange trade. You're not judging anyone, but you can't help seeing the math now. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This can create a strange kind of distance. Not because you've changed who you are, but because you've started operating with information most people around you don't have, or haven't internalized yet. Conversations about money, lifestyle, spending, all of it starts to sound slightly different to your ears. Some people describe this as feeling like they're playing a different game than everyone around them, even though, on the surface, nothing about their daily life looks any different. Same job. Same house. Same friends. but a different internal scoreboard. This isn't a reason to feel superior, and it's definitely not a reason to lecture the people in your life. But it is real, and it's worth knowing about in advance, because the isolation that sometimes comes with this shift catches people off guard. The good news is, it tends to fade as you find other people who are on the same path. People who speak the same quiet language of buffers, compounding, and calm decisions. You're not alone in this. You just might need to look in slightly different places to find your people. And that brings us to the fifth and final shift, the one that ties everything else together. Shift number 5. You stop asking, "Can I afford this?" and start asking, "Is this worth it?" This is the deepest shift of all, and it's the one that, once it happens, changes how you move through the rest of your life. Before $100,000, almost every purchase decision runs through a single filter. Can I afford this? It's a yes or no question, a binary gate, and it's exhausting. Because it has to be asked about almost everything, constantly. After $100,000 for most everyday purchases, that question quietly stops being relevant. Of course you can afford the dinner out. Of course you can afford the new pair of shoes. The yes or no gate disappears for most of daily life. But here's the twist. A new, more interesting question takes its place. Not "Can I afford this?" but "Is this actually worth it to me?" This question is harder. It requires you to know what you value. It requires you to think about trade-offs, not in terms of dollars you don't have, but in terms of priorities you do have. Is this purchase worth more to me than the 3 weeks of compounding it represents down the road? Is this experience worth more than the financial flexibility I'd be giving up? These aren't questions about scarcity anymore. They're questions about values. And learning to ask them well, genuinely well, is one of the most underrated skills in all of personal finance. Because the goal was never to reach a point where you stop thinking about money. The goal is to reach a point where the thinking gets to be about something more interesting than survival. So let's bring this together. $100,000. On paper, it's just a number. In 2026, plenty of people will tell you it's not even a particularly impressive one. But underneath that number, 5 things change, almost all at once, in ways that compound for the rest of your life. Your money gets a job and starts working alongside you instead of just waiting around. The hardest growth phase, the one that felt brutal and slow, is now behind you, even though the road ahead still looks similar at first glance. Your relationship with risk flips as a real financial buffer replaces fear with calm. Your perspective on the world around you shifts, sometimes in ways that feel isolating before they feel clarifying. And the central question driving your financial life evolves from "Can I afford this?" to "Is this worth it?" Here's what I want you to do with this. If you're nowhere near $100,000 yet, don't let that distance discourage you. Let it focus you. Because everything we just talked about isn't waiting for you at some far-off abstract finish line. It's waiting for you at a specific calculable point, and that point is closer than the grind makes it feel. And if you've already crossed it, and maybe didn't notice these shifts happening in real time, go back through them. See which ones have already quietly reshaped how you think. Because recognizing the shift is often the first step to using it on purpose, instead of just drifting through it. Because here's the truth underneath all of this. $100,000 was never really the goal. It was the threshold. The number where, for the first time, your money stops being something you only take from and starts being something that gives back. And once you've felt that, even once, you'll spend the rest of your financial life chasing that feeling again. At every level. For the rest of your life. If this video helped you see exactly what's waiting for you on the other side of this number, hit the like button. Subscribe for more breakdowns like this one.